And it is time now for our midrash on the letter written by maybe Paul or somebody else. Like as I always say, if it's not Paul, it's his cousin, somebody who's very knowledgeable of everything Jewish. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who has sanctified us with his commandment and has commanded us to be engaged in the words of Torah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kideshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. O Lord our God, we ask that you make the words of your Torah sweet in our mouths, in the mouth of your entire people, the house of Israel. May we, our descendants, and the descendants of your people, the house of Israel, know your name and study your Torah for its own sake. Blessed are you, O Lord, who teaches Torah to his people Israel. Blessed are you, O Lord, our God, King of the universe, who chose us from all the people and gave us his Torah. Blessed are you, O Lord, who gives us Torah. Baruch atah Adonai noten ha-Torah. Hebrews 12:1. So then, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, you remember last week we talked about this cloud of witnesses, all these witnesses that are watching us. Each of them comparable to one of the droplets that makes a very great cloud. We talked about Abraham, Abel, Noah, Gideon, Jephthah. Now the writer uses a very Greek analogy. He compares his audience to athletes running a race. And this cloud of witnesses is in the grandstands, cheering them on. They have trained, the athletes, the audience, have trained with weights on their ankles. But now, as they get ready to run the race, they take off these weights, which allows them now to literally fly. He compares these weights that provide training, that provide strengthening. He compares these weights to sin. The sin which we have got to part from if we really want to win this race. The author, as he's talking to them, I believe, is also talking to us, telling us that we also must put aside every impediment, that is, the sin which easily hampers our forward movement, and keep running with endurance in the contest set before us. And we must do so while looking away to the initiator and completer of that trusting. You remember he's been talking about this trusting, this faith which is great because it believes though never receiving the promise. We need to run, putting aside every impediment, the sin which easily hampers our forward movement, and keep running with endurance in the contest set before us, looking away to the initiator and completer of that trusting. And we know who that is. That is Yeshua. Look at Yeshua, he says. Pattern yourself after the Master. And this patterning after the Master is in fact the true meaning of discipleship. So we're supposed to pattern ourselves after Yeshua. And what is it that Yeshua did? It says in the text, he says, who in exchange for obtaining the joy set before him, endured execution on a stake as criminal, scorning the shame, and has sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. So he says, looking away to the initiator and completer of that trusting. Basically, we're supposed to look at him and pattern ourselves after the guy who let go, who for the sake of the joy that was before him was willing to endure persecution at the stake as a criminal while scorning the shame, and now he's sat down at the right hand of God. What the author is telling the Israeli believers of the first century says, you think you have it badly? If you ever think you have it badly, think of Yeshua, few decades before you. Remember Yeshua. You think you have it badly? Remember Yeshua. If something bad happens to us, at least we deserve it. At least when something good happens, we don't deserve it either. But when something bad, we deserve it. We don't deserve any of God's goodness. But Yeshua, he didn't deserve it. He didn't sin. So here, whatever comes to us, we need to think we're getting away easy. But him, it was unjustified. So that's what he's saying. So you think you have it bad. Well, look at Yeshua, who endured willingly all that. He endured execution on the stake as a criminal when he was not a criminal. Scorning the shame, and what did he win in exchange? He sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Our author will continue on that theme. You see, he spent 11 chapters of his letter. Of course, the letter was not divided in chapters, it was a letter. But just for the sake of our format, he did spend 11 chapters telling us of the greatness of Yeshua. Now he's telling us how Yeshua reacted to persecution, vilification, restrictions, destitutions, and false accusations. What is he telling us? How did Yeshua take persecutions, vilification, restrictions, destitutions, accusations, false accusations? How did he react? Did he go and claim his rights to Pilate? I'm a Jew from Jerusalem. This is my country. What are you doing to me? My rights are being infringed. The Sanhedrin broke every rule in the book during the trial of Yeshua before his crucifixion. But did Yeshua go to the high priest or to Rome to demand that his rights be upheld as an Israeli citizen of the tribe of Judah? Did he sit down with the priests to show them that they were doing wrong in trying to kill him? Did he and his disciples lead a rebellion, a protest in the streets of Jerusalem? No. If you remember, though he had every right to do so, he didn't even try to defend or justify himself, neither to Caiaphas nor to Pilate. That's the guy our author is telling us to pattern after. I didn't say it, he did. He says, run the race, enduring everything, looking into Yeshua, the author, how did he call him? How did he say it here?
Author and finisher of our faith.
Yes. The author and finisher, some versions say, and the initiator and completer of our faith. So he's telling us to pattern ourselves with that. If you don't like it, just go to the text. But why? Somebody wants to defend themselves, it's not bad. But why? Why is it that our author is telling his audience to pattern themselves after Yeshua, who did not fight it? Why is he saying that? That sounds really crazy. He should tell them, hey, take your arms, go do this, go do that. No, he's telling them to do like Yeshua, who didn't fight it. There is a reason behind it. And lo and behold, he's going to tell us in the next few lines. The author of the letter is telling the Israeli believers to look to Yeshua as an example of behavior during their time of trial. He is not telling them to look to the zealots and their political uprisings which ended up being responsible for the burning of the temple and for the destruction of Jerusalem. And the opposite to the destruction of Jerusalem brought on by the zealots, the death of Yeshua will eventually bring on the rebuilding of the temple and the bringing down of the new Jerusalem. So the author tells his audience, Hebrews 12:3, think about him who endured such hostility against himself from sinners, so that you won't grow tired or become despondent. I like this word, despondent. You know, it's oh, poor me. If we look to him, if we meditate on his unjustified suffering, we won't get tired or despondent. You see, we're supposed to not look at what's happening. So we look at Yeshua and say, oh, if we look to him and say, well, I'm having it easy. So then he chides them in Hebrews 12:4. He says, you have not yet resisted to the point of shedding blood in the contest against sin. You know, and with sin here, I believe he's meaning the sinful behavior of people who harass them. He says, you have not yet resisted to the point of shedding blood in the contest against sin. All you got, he's saying, is some harassment, some freedom restriction, some financial hardship, some beating, some imprisonment, and so what? Did you get what Yeshua got? And if the author is Paul, which might very well be, he's talking from personal experience. He himself was beaten and all kinds of things happened to him. So now that the author is going to give us a rationale for that. A rationale which is good for them, as in my book is good for us today in our own fight against the sinful society. You remember we read today about the laws of Nazir, the laws of the separated one. We're supposed to be, as Nazarenes, disciples of the Nazarene, we're supposed to be Nazarites, separated. Yeshua said, you are in the world, but not of the world. You know, so he gave a lot of advice about that. He says, John says, if you love the world, the love of the Father is not in you. When he's talking about the world, he's talking the world and its ways, its proud, independent, rebellious ways. We're not supposed to be that way. We're supposed to be separated, Nazir. So here's the rationale, which is the reason why he tells them to, no, don't rebel, just accept it, endure. Why? Hebrews 12:5. You have forgotten the counsel which speaks with you as sons. And he's going to take something from Proverbs 3:11, which says, "My son, don't despise the discipline of Adonai or become despondent when he corrects you." I'll read it straight from Proverbs 3:11 to 18. "My son, don't despise Adonai's discipline or resent his reproof, for Adonai corrects those he loves like a father who delights in his son. Happy is the person who finds wisdom, the person who acquires understanding, for her profit exceeds that of silver. Gaining her is better than gold. She is more precious than pearls. Nothing you want can compare with her. Long life is in her right hand, riches and honor is in her left. Her ways are pleasant ways, and all her paths have peace. She is a tree of life to those who grasp her. Whoever holds fast to her will be made happy." He's talking about the Torah, which comes in the Torah from God, which comes in the form of rebellion. I need to ask something from Christina right now because there seems to be some technical problem. Am I still on?
It looks like it.
Okay.
It is. Yeah, it looks like you're still here.
Okay, good. So here we have the source of that song that we sing at the end of Torah service, the tree of life. Etz Chaim. She is the tree of life. So the
Okay.
Are we on still?
It's frozen. Okay. See.
Okay. Maybe we have a bit of problems.
Okay. Just. You need a new computer, Papa. Are you gonna restore it to factory settings?
So is it on right now?
Oh, it's funny. It looks like you just asked me and I could hear it. Oh, hold on. You know what? I'm a little bit late. Okay, I'm. Okay, hold on. Can you hear me?
Can you hear me? Can you see me? Gotta note that there is some problems with the recording.
Just for the sake of our format. Then, since you are
It looks like you're still on.
Okay. Yes?
Do something different, like wave your hand or something.
I cannot see. It's black. My screen is black. Okay. Okay. So we're still on. So we'll continue. We're dealing with technology problems here, but we will endure. We will endure, and we will not give up. We look to Yeshua, who didn't have all that. Okay. So.
Yeah, it's all working. Everything's okay.
Okay, so here he's going to give them the rationale for what's happening to them, the reason, the way to understand it, the way to process it, because like we said before, they're coming to a point where they're wondering if God is even answering their prayers. This is why he gave them examples of people whose faith was commended for believing though they never got answers. But now he's going to give them a rationale for that type of faith. And I think it's a very important message for us today. He tells them in 12:5, he quotes from King Solomon, which says, "My son, don't despise the discipline of Adonai or become despondent when he corrects you." So, first of all, that statement tells us that their difficult situation and predicament doesn't come from the Roman nor from the Israeli government. It doesn't come from the temple priesthood that hates them. It doesn't come from the Romans who want to control them. It doesn't come from that. So there is no reason to be mad at them. Remember, he said, my son, despise not the discipline of Adonai. Okay? So, doesn't come from below, it comes from above. So, there is not really a reason to fight or to blame the government, because it's in fact an act of God. It is an act of discipline from the Almighty God of Israel. So, again, there's something we can learn from that. Now, I want to clarify the word discipline. Discipline is a word today that refers to punishment. But that's not at all the way it's used in this context. The word discipline has another word we know in it. Yes, you found it. The word disciple. In this context, what discipline means is discipleship training. It's like going to school. In school, you have a teacher who berates you with problems, and you feel uncomfortable, you want to yell, you want to scream, you want to go play outside. You're tired of doing these problems, and oh boy, I'm sure some of you children listening understand what I'm saying. But you need it. You need to learn these things. So this is what it is. When he says the discipline of the Lord, he's talking about the training of the Lord into discipleship. It's the entrance exam. And we should not despise it. Like, we should not be mad at our teachers for giving us problems to solve, asking us questions that we seem not to be able to answer, for forcing us to work, making our lives terrible in school, right? We shouldn't be mad at our teacher. That's what he's saying. Don't you remember King Solomon just says, don't be mad at God for trying to teach you and correct your wrong ways. That's what correcting wrong ways is part of teaching. Don't despise the teaching of Adonai or become despondent when he corrects you. Oh, you always tell me I do wrong. You tell me I meant my letters wrong.
It's frozen. It's back.
So this is what's going on here. It's discipleship training. After his resurrection, the Master said to his disciples in John 20:21, as the Father has sent me, even so I am sending you. So if we are to have the same mission, we are to have the same lives. Didn't he say to us in John 15:20, a servant is not greater than his master. If they persecuted me, they will also persecute you. If they kept my word, they will also keep yours. So basically, since we have the same mission, we need to have the same training. And that's why these things are happening. We're being trained with the same training Yeshua was given, because we have the same mission. We should be honored by it. As Yeshua interpreted his own predicament as coming from the Father for his own discipline and training, remember that it is said also that he did learn obedience through the things which he suffered. That's also in the book of Hebrews. We read it before. As he didn't fight against it, but yielded to it as coming from the Father, so should we not fight against the discipleship training that comes from the Father in the form of persecutions, vilification, restrictions, destitutions, and false accusations. I didn't say it, the book did. The letter says it when it challenges the disciples with, you have not resisted to the point of shedding blood, in the context contest against sin. Also, you have forgotten the counsel which speaks with you as son. My son, don't despise the discipline of Adonai or become despondent when he corrects you. Verse 6, for Adonai disciplines those he loves and whips everyone he accepts as a son. That's supposed not to refer to child abuse, or correction is supposed to refer to training. We need to read these things not in the 21st century America, but in first century rural Israel. You know, this was how people were taught. Even my wife has stories of when she was taught Catholic school that would rest the hair on your hair. No, the hair on your head. Sorry.
And you too.
And me too, yes. So it's not so far away. Today we can't do these things. And it was all for the purpose of teaching. So he trains, he teaches, he forms those who he loves. He even uses the whip of persecutions, vilifications, restrictions, destitutions, and false accusations. That's the whip that trains and teaches us. That's how we're supposed to look at these things. Not as some sort of injustice, I deserve better. It is God's intolerable compliment. So then he continues with verse 7, regard your endurance as discipline training. God is dealing with you as sons. For what son goes undisciplined by his father? All legitimate sons undergo discipline. So if you don't, you're a mamzer, not a son. The King James Bible says that if you don't, you're a bastard, not a son. That's what a mamzer is. When I was a young teenager, I did some things that were wrong. I skipped school and blah, blah, blah. I won't go into details. But when my uncles caught me, and I won't make it a long story, but he ended up giving me a severe discipline, and I'm not going to get into details. Severe discipline for 1 week. From Monday to Friday. On the Sabbath, he rested. Boy, was I thankful for Sabbath that week. But he always felt bad about it, and I met him last year, 2 years ago, when I went to France to visit my father before he passed away. And I met my uncle. 45 years had passed. And he almost cried as he was telling me how bad he felt about it. But as he was telling me about it, he was telling me of his own father. You know, you got to remember, I come from a Tunisian family. And we're talking Tunisia, pre-World War II Tunisia, before World War II. So he was telling me how his father loved them, how his father actually, in their house in Tunisia, he had made his bedroom not in a regular bedroom, but in the hallway, so he could see whoever's going in and out of the house. So it was for safety, control, of course, fatherhood, you know, but also so he could give them a kiss as they went out and as they came in. It was his ritual. And every day at the table, 3 times a day, he would go around all the children, and he had 10 children, give a kiss to everybody. And if he had something to tell you, he was a strict disciplinarian, but he did it with love. After that, he always gave you a kiss. And my uncle was almost crying as he was telling me about this. And I was wondering, why is he telling me? And then he said, you know I disciplined you harshly. Until this day, it works on me. But one day I was talking to my wife about it, my uncle said. And he said, and my wife told me that you did that. You've done that with all the Lumbroso boys, and even with your own children. But the difference is that with your children, you're around to show them love. With Gabriel, you were not. And he understood that. The discipline's okay as long as there is love. I told him, look, I never thought twice of it. I really blew it. I did something wrong, got caught, got punished. So what? This is life. And then he said, he told me, he says, you are a Lumbroso boy. As a Lumbroso boy, you deserve the training of the Lumbrosos. You cannot bring the family name to shame. And to me, even that was so beautiful, because I thought, wow, he disciplined me because I'm considered part of the family. And to me that was wow. And if you knew my whole story, you'd understand how much I could appreciate that. So and this is the same idea here. This is the same idea where Hashem disciplines us. Discipline that sometimes we want to fight against, but at the end of the day, the reason he does that is because we're his children. So it's beautiful. This discipline that uses persecutions, vilifications, restrictions, destitutions, and false accusation provides genuine benefit to us and enables us to share in the holiness of God, to become Nazir, like what we were talking about. It provides genuine benefit to us and enables us to share in his holiness. That's what it says in Hebrews 12:10. So there's things that happen to us, that's how we should take them. That's something we need to fight. When you say, oh, thank God. Remember what we read in Hebrews 11, verses 35 through 38. It says, women received back their dead by resurrection. Some were tortured, refusing to accept release. Torture, refusing to accept release, so that they might rise again to a better life. That sounds like Yeshua. Others suffered mocking, flogging, and even chains and imprisonment. They were stoned, they were sawn in two, they were killed with the sword. They went about in skins of sheep and goats, destitute, afflicted, and mistreated, of whom the world was not worthy, wandering about in deserts and mountains and in dens and caves of the earth. They didn't complain of their situation, say, yes, I'm a chosen one, yes. Now, in verse 11, the author is going to level with us a little bit. Now, all discipline, while it is happening, does indeed seem painful. All training, when we're in school, it's like, oh, do I have to do this again? It's too hard. I don't know. It seems painful, not enjoyable. But for those who have been trained by it, it later produces its peaceful fruit. And what is that peaceful fruit? Righteousness. It's funny how we all want to be righteous, but we don't want to go through the training that makes us righteous. We all want to be humble, but we don't want to be humiliated. We all want to be knowledgeable, but we don't want to sit down and study. Now the pep talk. Verse 12. So, what's coming up now? So, strengthen your drooping arms. Drooping arms says, strengthen your drooping arms and steady your tottering knees. Steady your tottering knees. That's beautiful. And make a level path for your feet. Whatever that means, it sounds great. So that what has been injured will not get wrenched out of joint, but rather will be healed. I think he's talking about the discouragement of the heart. He's not talking with people with knee rheumatism or people who can't stand up. He's talking about the despondency and discouragement of the heart due to the hardship, which is understandable. He's telling them, come on, strengthen your drooping arms, steady your tottering knees, make a level path for your feet so that what has been injured will not get wrenched out of joint, but rather will be healed. All this broken stuff is because we look at our miserable earthly condition. But instead, we should be looking away to the initiator and completer of that trusting, which is Yeshua. Remember, that's the beginning of the chapter. Now he's going to continue with a checklist, a conduct checklist. You know, he says that he gave us the spiritual thing we're supposed to do. You know, strengthen your drooping arms. Come on, get yourself cheered up. You know, get going. Quit you like man, he says is in another place. You know. But that idea itself is very spiritual, is very emotional, but it comes with actions. So now the next verse is going to give us the next passages will give us the actions that go with strengthening our drooping arms, steadying our tottering knees, and making level path for our feet, so that what has been injured will not get wrenched out of joint but rather be healed. He says, verse 14, pursuing shalom with everyone. Pursuing shalom with everyone. You know, pursuing shalom. I like that expression. Pursuing, you only pursue something that's going away, something that's running ahead. You know, shalom, peaceful, peace and all that is not something that just there and it stays there. Shalom is under attack and it's fleeing. Shalom is under attack by our own human nature of being jealous, covetous, liars. We're not as human beings, we're not always very good. And shalom goes away whenever we give in to our human nature. But we need to pursue it, which means it takes an effort to pursue shalom, to do the things that provoke shalom, to go against our human nature, our animal nature. You know, he's saying our congregations need to be places of peace, where we do everything for the sake of peace. Where our rights are not as important as peace, where our desires are not as important as provoking peace. He says, pursuing shalom with everyone, and the holiness without which no one will see the Lord. Okay, this holiness is that separation from those human proud ways. And this holiness actually happens, like we read before, through this training. That's what separates us. It says before, you remember we read it, let's see. This training, in verse 10, has great benefit, which provides genuine benefit to us and enables us to share in His holiness. So we want to be holy, but we've got to go through the training. And the training is, here's the curriculum for holiness. Persecutions, vilifications, restrictions, destitutions, false accusations. There might be more. You know, there's no holiness without going through these things. That's what he's teaching, really. And the holiness, verse 14, without which no one will see the Lord. And then he says, Hashem disciplines us in a way that provides genuine benefit. And okay, we'll read that again. Okay, 15. See to it that no one misses out on God's grace. So he's saying, see to it that no one misses from Hashem's eternal favor. That comes from having relationships between ourselves that are loving, forgiving, compassionate. That's how it comes. We're supposed to make sure that no one misses out, that no one feels unloved, that no one feels unforgiven, that no one feels set aside. And that's not just a responsibility of the rabbi to do that. That's a responsibility of everyone. We're supposed to look out for each other. You know, it says, see to it that no one misses out on God's grace. It's beautiful. That no root of bitterness springing up causes trouble and thus contaminates many. Oh, now he's being specific about this missing out of God's grace. That somebody feels so discouraged as, God, forget it. I'm tired of this thing. I'm just gonna let go of it all. He says we're supposed to watch out for each other, that no one feels that discouraged, you know, by bitterness. I heard a story about bitterness recently. It's a story about a plant called matador, which grows in South America. Somebody compared that plant to what bitterness does. Roughly translated, the Spanish word matador, you know, matador is the guy who goes with the in the corrida, you know, in Spain, with a bull, you know. They are dressed in bright colors and funny hats, and they have a red thing, and the bull is supposed to, you know, and as the bull comes, he's supposed to put a big arrow, some sort of something on his back. And the word matador actually means killer, roughly translated. It means killer. And why is this plant called matador? The matador begins its life growing at the foot of a tree. At first, it looks like a harmless little plant, but as it grows, the matador relentlessly winds its way around the tree, makes its way to the top, and slowly strangles the tree. A plant that strangles a tree. When the matador reaches the tree's top, it bursts forth in flower, and as though celebrating its skill and crowning himself victor. Wow, that's bitterness. Very good, a very good illustration of bitterness. Now, bitterness can be a habit. To negatively interpret things, or to interpret things in our life in ways that make us feel very negative or bitter. It can be a habit, a bad habit, you know, and many habits in our lives are like the matador. They seem harmless at first. They grow slowly, but if left unchecked, they are dangerous. Here, there's a quote from Rob Gilbert about habits. It says, first we form habits, then they form us. We form habit by allowing them in our lives, but then they form us. So he says, conquer your bad habits, or they will conquer you. And then they'll crown themselves with a flower. So this was about bitterness. You know, and we're supposed to watch for each other about this. See that, verse 16, see that no one is sexually immoral. Sexual immorality, I don't need to talk about it, but it was part and parcel of Hellenism, of Greek culture. And we're supposed to be separated from the culture of the world around us. Or godless like Esau, who in exchange for a single meal gave up his rights as the firstborn. So here we have, he says, do not exchange the glories of the kingdom to come for a platter of soup here. Happiness here is like a platter of soup. To pursue happiness here is really pursuing a platter of soup while neglecting the great rewards to come as we endure life here. Moshe and Yeshua left us examples of that. Moshe left Egypt the palace of Egypt to be a slave with his brothers. And Yeshua refused the crown that Satan wanted to give him. The crown that didn't go through what is it we're talking about? The crown that didn't go, the devil offered the crown to Yeshua, a crown that didn't go through persecutions, vilifications, restrictions, destitution, and false accusation. He said, I'll give it to you. You just don't have to go through all that. Father is a hard master. Come on. Yeshua said, no. I want it legally. I don't want to just be carried through the finish line. I want to run that race. You know? So, but Esau was the opposite of that. He said, oh, forget the race, give me the soup. Verse 17, for you know that afterwards when he, Esau, wanted to obtain his father's blessing, he was rejected. Indeed, even though he sought it with tears, his change of heart was to no avail. That's a very stern warning. So now we know the rationale for these persecutions, vilifications, restrictions, destitutions, and false accusations. But why such a hard training, you know? You know, if you just want to be a nurse, if you shouldn't say just, if you want to be a nurse, you have to go through so much schooling. That costs a certain amount of money, time, and study. But if you want to be a heart surgeon, much more school, much more money, much more studies, much more discipline, much more glory. If you want to drive a car, you just go get a driver's license. If you want to fly a space shuttle, whoa, that's different. So here's same thing, you know. The training is difficult, the training is hard because the reward, the prize is so great. He says, and he's going to explain what the price is by using a kol ve'omer again. You have not come to the tangible mountain, to an ignited fire, to darkness, to murk, to a whirlwind, to the sound of the shofar, to a voice whose word made the hearers beg that no further message be given to them, for they couldn't bear what was being commanded them. If even an animal touches the mountain, it is to be stoned to death. And so terrifying was the sight that Moshe said, I'm quaking with dread. We're talking about Mount Horeb, what happened when Hashem gave the commandment. Remember, we talked about it last week. We read about it last week in Exodus 19 and 20, Shavuot. What he's telling, you thought that was terrible? You thought that was terrible, but that's not where you're going to. That's okay, that's terrible, yes, but what you're going to is to Mount Zion. That is the city of the living God. Heavenly Yerushalayim, to myriads of angels in festive assembly. You think Mount Sinai was something? That's something else. You're coming to a community of the firstborn whose names have been recorded in heaven, to a judge who is God of everyone, to spirits of righteous people who have been brought to the goal, to the mediator of a new covenant, Yeshua, and to the sprinkled blood that speaks better things than that of Abel. So that you don't reject, see that you don't reject the one speaking. And then he's going to use that big kol ve'omer. For if those did not escape who rejected him when he gave them divine warning on earth, think how much less we will escape if we turn away from him when he warns from heaven. So again, you know, oh yes, Mount Horeb was great, was awesome, was terrifying. But it dwarfs, it pales in comparison to where we're going. He says, if those people who rejected that command on earth, the divine, those people who disrespected the divine command on earth, if they didn't get away with it, how much less you will get away with it for this one. If disobedience to Moshe was bad, how much worse is it to ignore the Son of God? Verse 26. Even then his voice shook the earth, but now he has made this promise. One more time I will shake not only the earth, but heaven too. So here our writer writes about Mount Horeb when God shook the earth. And say, yeah, that was terrible, but what for what's coming up? And as a proof text that what's coming up is even more terrible, he's bringing some writings from the prophet Haggai. Haggai 2, 6 through 9, where it is said in his prophecy, "For this is what Adonai Tsevaot says, it won't be long before one more time I will shake the heavens and the earth, the sea and the dry land, and I will shake all the nations, so that the treasures of all the nations will flow in, and I will fill this house with glory, says Adonai Tsevaot. The silver is mine, the gold is mine, says Adonai Tsevaot. The glory of this new house will surpass that of old, says Adonai Tsevaot. And in this place I will grant Shalom, says Adonai Tsevaot." So this is the proof text is saying to bring out, to say, look, it was terrible in Mount Horeb, in Sinai Desert, but it's going to be worse. And remember what Haggai said, verse 27. And this phrase, one more time, which is from the verse in Haggai, makes it clear that the things shaken are removed, since they are created things, so that the things not shaken remained. So the shaking, the shaking is the idea of, what's it called? The word escapes me. It's the idea of taking away what's not solid and doing, what's that?
Threshing?
Yeah, threshing. Taking away what doesn't stand and leaving the rest. It's a judgment. So the shaken stuff, what doesn't hold tight and what does not, it's removed. It's removed, and so that the things not shaken remain. Therefore, since we have received an unshakable kingdom, let us have grace through which we may offer service that will please God with reverence and fear. So there's grace, he says, it's everything we were talking about. Endure with patience, looking at him who's had it much worse than you and all the other guys before. Come on, quit your complaining, quit your life. Man, he's saying, there's much at stake here. And then he says, for indeed our God is a consuming fire. That's verse 29. Fire. Fire consumes dross, wood, and stubble. So here the shaking is an example. Shaken, whatever it falls off, dead stuff. We see it in nature all the time. In spring, there's often violent storms, especially in our moderate temperate regions, and these storms they actually seem to break all the dead branches, and clean up everything, so that what's left is the solid stuff that's going to bear fruit. Because remember, if we don't bear fruit, we also go to the furnace. And fire consumes dross, wood, stubble, but it purifies gold and silver. Here's the idea behind it. My God is a consuming fire. Here's the idea. In 1 Corinthians 3, 9 to 15, the writer Paul explains a little bit more. It's a different kind of, the word escapes me, of sorting out, of It's going to come back. He says, for we are God's co-workers. You are God's field, God's building. Using grace God gave me, I lay a foundation like a skilled master builder, and another man is building on it. But let each one be careful how he builds, for no one can lay any foundation other than the one already laid, which is Yeshua, the Messiah. Some will use gold, silver to build on that foundation. Some will use gold, silver, precious stones in building on this foundation, while others will use wood, grass, and straw. And then hear what he says. But each one's work will be shown for what it is. The day, capital D, will disclose it because it will be revealed by fire. The fire will test the quality of each one's work. If the work someone has built on the foundation survives, he will receive a reward. If it is burnt up, he will have to bear the loss. He will still escape with his life, but it will be like escaping through fire. So this is not about redemption. This is about rewards, running the race. You know, what do we put on that foundation that we've been given? Our lives will be shown for what it is through the consuming fire of God. And whatever is wood, stubble, or straw will be burned away. But whatever is strong, like, you know, gold, silver, is purified through fire, through heat. So it's really important. You know, it's really important. And again, this is the whole context of this discipline that we receive, teaching us to take away, to let go of the dross in our lives, of the weight that so easily, the sin that hampers our forward movement, the dross that keeps leaves our arms drooping. You know, we take it out, strength again, getting rid of all the superfluous stuff of our lives. That's what it's doing. Malachi also talks about it. Talks about the day of the Lord as a fire. He says in Malachi 3:2 and 3, but who can endure the day when he comes? Who can stand when he appears? For he will be like a refiner's fire, like soap maker's lye, L-Y-E, not L-I-E. He will sit testing and purifying the silver. He will purify the sons of Levi, refining them like gold and silver, so that they can bring offerings to Adonai uprightly. And you know, it says, you know, judgment starts with God's house. And what was one of the first things Yeshua did? Is to purify Levi. He went to the temple and did his thing. Here, I have a little story about a refiner. A woman once went to visit a silversmith. She went and without telling the object of her errand, begged to know the process of refining silver, which the smith described to her. But sir, she said, do you sit while the work of refining is going on? Oh yes, ma'am, replied the silversmith. I must sit with my eyes steadily fixed on the furnace. For if the time necessary for refining is exceeded in the slightest degree, the silver will be injured. The woman at once saw the beauty and comfort of the expression that we read in Malachi. He shall sit as a refiner and purifier of silver. God sees it needful to put his children into a furnace, refining, being made holy, training, teaching, right? Discipline. That's what we've been talking about. Discipline that comes through persecutions, vilification, restrictions, destitutions, false accusations. God sees it needful to put his children into a furnace. His eye is steadily intent on the work of purifying, and his wisdom and love are both engaged in the best manner for them. Their trials do not come at random. The very hairs of your head are numbered, it is said. And it will not last one second longer than necessary. Because if not, the silver is injured. As the woman was leaving the shop, the silversmith called her back and said that he had forgotten to mention that the only way to know when the purifying process is complete is when he can see his own image reflected in the silver. You see, when it's being purified, the silver sizzles, and when it sizzles, you can't see our face in it. But when it's done sizzling, when it finally stops struggling against this fire, when he says, "Okay, I'll give up," I say, "Uncle," when it stops, he says, "Oh," then it's like a mirror, and the silversmith can see its own face in the cauldron. Our discipleship training, the purifying process, is only over when the master can see his own face, his own image reflected in us. That's what Paul says in Romans 8:29. That those whom he foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the image of his Son, in order that he might be the firstborn among many brothers. Well, I hope that this gives us all a lot to think about our lives on earth. Abba Father, we pray that you help us to take the things that come to us not as random events provoked by our conditions here, but as tools, the tools of the trade, our curriculum, the curriculum that brings us into the graduation of being made holy, Nazir, purified, to a point where you can see your face in us. B'Shem Yeshua Mashiach, Amen. And now let's sing.